Good morning, and thank you very much for gathering here with us today on this seminar, which is so important. I think that this is a very interesting subject to all of us. RiskRadar is a platform that was developed by experts in compliance, and we can assess risks against money laundering, sanctions, and that's why the platform was done for the financial sector. But we also have the possibility of handling risks against cryptocurrency and crypto. So this morning, and I wanted to say something else. This platform, RiskRadar, regulators in the US, such as FinCEN, we have presented this to OFCC, FDIC, banks that are using the platform currently with those regulators, with very positive results. And the platform is also being used in many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. My Spanish is not the best, although, well, I was born in Latin America. I have no excuses, but in these countries, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have the platform, and they find it as something very robust, very strong, and we have been given very positive recommendations. So this morning, it is my honor to have here with us to talk about this issue two people who have a great amount of experience, not only in compliance, both of them, Ana Maria and Rod, but specifically regarding crypto. So with that, I would like to introduce to you Ana Maria, who is going to be this morning's moderator. Thank you very much, Celeste, and well, welcome everybody. I do not want to talk so much because I would like to give our space to Roderick Shorts, who, as Celeste was saying, is a person who has trained so much. He has a great amount of knowledge, both in the application of controls and designs for programs regarding crypto assets, and his presentation is super important to all of you here today. And we're going to have a wonderful opportunity to share our questions to him during the presentation as well as at the end. This is going to be recorded, so you're going to be able to keep that, and it is also being simultaneously interpreted into English because we have also guests who speak both English and Spanish. So you're going to be able to have this presentation in both languages. So without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to Rod. I'm going to be moderating the presentation, and if questions come up, I will share with them. And I already have a few that I would like to ask that will be interesting for the audience. Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen. And well, let's talk about crypto. Basically, that's it. That's what we want. And the time that we are going to share today, we're going to be talking about crypto, about the market trends. And I think that any financial institution that wants to offer services and products in crypto, well, they need to have this. And I think that is perfect timing. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Please let me know when you can see it
Ya lo
correctly.
estamos viendo, Rod.
We are seeing it, Rod. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. It's very packed with a lot of information that, well, we're not going to have time to go in depth into all of these issues, but we're going to see how to move forward during the next episode. So basically, our agenda for today is to speak about crypto news because this is something that is always evolving and changing. We're going to speak about the main concerns, the international standards, the travel rule, how we're with that. We're going to see the crypto crime economics to understand risks, challenges. We're going to be speaking about the mixers, the important process that takes the crypto profile determination from our clients. Super important to have the ability of recognizing unusual, suspicious activities, which is our duty to then report to authorities. We're going to be speaking about blockchain and what blockchain, given its features, what it can offer regarding transaction monitoring. We're going to be speaking about model integration. We're going to speak about risk assessment in products and crypto services. We're going to be speaking about GAFE recommendations, both US and crypto relationships and national priorities. And to the end, we'll get to some conclusions and considerations. So before continuing, I wanted to mention to you that we have all of these references and resources that we have consulted so that we can bring to you the technical, precise information and as updated as possible. I think that in less than a month, we're going to have things that will be updated, but we wanted to do then the corresponding updates we're going to have from Edmond Leibniz Chainalysis and the US government mainly. Of course, we also handle other information, but to build this presentation, this is what has been used. Okay, let's talk about crypto news, because what now seems to follow surveys that Elliptic has done, it would seem that banks, fintechs, and payment service providers are accelerating their plans to adopt crypto products and services in this 2025. All of this is motivated to have a greater clarity regarding regulations, but this is also going to bring greater amount of innovation. We will adapt differences from the competitive point of view and regarding innovation. And of course, it will allow the institutions to have new resources and sources of revenues since there will be a greater adoption of the crypto ecosystem in our market. However, talking so many years after that, there's the double of investment so many years later that is being measured for the adoption in the financial market. And what we have been speaking so many years after the white paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, what has happened is that there has been a certain uncertainty regarding regulations, and many countries in Latin America, with a few exceptions, US and so on. Therefore, uncertainty has been the recurrent factor, which has been an important obstacle for the adoption of the crypto world and the financial system to be more important, right? So that lack of clarity about compliance requirements, well, that has meant that many organizations have operated with excessive caution because, well, we do not know where things are coming from. And, well, basically, we need to find out what could happen from AML, from financing, the fiscal point of view, the accounting point of view, and even reserves for the financial institutions who want to go into this world. However, it would seem that changes are really near, and this is shaping the regulatory landscape. There are studies in very exemplary cases where, by having a clear regulation, this immediately generates trust, it brings investments, and it creates a greater adoption and growth in the crypto ecosystem. And the European Union, the United Arab Emirates, Hong Kong, and Singapore are giving very clear views about how, with very clear rules, the financial institutions can start playing because the game rules are very clear and fair. Well, this has not happened in all markets. We believe that after the US elections, the regulatory landscape is going to continue evolving and having a greater amount of clarity. That's why we think that there's going to be a great impact and growth on the crypto ecosystem at a world level, considering the size and what the US represents in the global economy. And even so, the rules are not really clear yet. There are some expectations. And so currently, institutions are using opportunities in a very secure manner in this context, which is constantly evolving. And I think that it is important to continue discussing about the risks and the concerns of the ecosystem so that we can really understand which are the coming regulations and able to understand the regulation expectations, regardless of the states where you work or make business. The main concern is the financial stability of the industry and the mitigation of systemic risks. We have seen very important cases, some more recent than others, which have a very important impact. And when we can see the factor of adoption, the concentration of some virtual assets, and we can see that a failure there can create a devastating effect, especially considering the size of the crypto ecosystem that is about $3 billion. Well, and from the Congress, we've heard about how the crypto management in the US could even affect leadership in the US. And seeing that lack of clear rules, the lack of guidelines on how to implement all of this, well, we can still see a lack of understanding regarding the crypto ecosystems, both as citizen levels who can then undergo fraud and other very complicated situations, and even from the institutions themselves, the governments in the world regarding their own supervision. The lack of clear, precise regulation is something that is clear. We're going to be talking about that considering some of the FAT publications. And we'll try to get innovation, but through a responsible innovation so that there can be a framework capable of facilitating investigation and prosecution for those who are abusing this ecosystem so that they can receive the corresponding actions. And currently, to have all of the international framework for national and international cooperation, and blockchain offers this because these are open, they often traceability, which is very important to the movement of crypto actives. And well, what is it that we're concerned about mainly? Well, that there's an increased space for illicit finance to find space where to enable money laundering and even proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And currently, that's why we're seeing that the regulations where they get to evolve will be oriented towards the protection of consumers, investors, and businesses. Many have been affected by the lack of clear rules to protect consumers, investors, and businesses, so that those institutions which offer products and services in crypto can understand the need of behaving with an adequate care for their assets and adequate segregation for their wallets and good governance practices. If we remember FTX, where there were not good governance practices, where there was not an adequate corporative structure to have the segregation and the control elements to avoid conflicts of interests, to have a transparency offering report and an efficient control structure so as to avoid the use of the crypto space as a means to crime or harm to consumers and investors as well as other businesses. So when we talk about that space that is generated in the fight or in illicit finances, well, it is well, there are many, many concerns. We have all of the proof of not only current, but for a long time, that terrorism is using the crypto space. where there's an increase of the ransomware activity. And we're going to speak about ransomware specifically because that is one of the most important concerns currently, where some failed states can sponsor the use of crypto activities within the ecosystem, which harm countries, people, infrastructures, and so on, where there are also drug cartels that can find within the crypto ecosystem the opportunity of moving money as a product of their activities. Very clear cases that have to do not only with fentanyl than traditional narcotics, that has a very important situation given what is happening in particularly in the United States as well as in other countries. Fraud, we're going to be talking about that because there's a sort of understanding that criminal activity in the crypto ecosystem has decreased. Yet there's a trend that doesn't show precisely that, but quite the opposite. Amongst that, we have ransomware and some money laundering and the financing through crypto assets. So when all of these elements are present, well, the concerns need to be real and the options need to be responsible with clear rules so that we can prevent this crypto system innovation to enable complex activities such as the ones I was mentioning. And that's why international standards tend to be a key element. And let's go into that. Allow me to show you the last report from FATF. I think we're going to have an update about how it is, but the news are not that good. What is good is how Gafi and the international standards, especially 15 and 16, and the clarity of making mixers, how the standards need to apply regarding what is the crypto movement or crypto fiat, where there's an important call given the importance of the standards we have had, especially the de-risking, where the Gafi, where the FATF is saying that virtual asset providers do not necessarily need to be considered immediately of higher risk by defect, which is what our international organization says. And what it speaks about is the initiated consequences, because there has been a wrong application both from our institutions or the way in which they have been supervising, where they have not been able to understand what Gafi wants to do in specific situations. And this risking is so that we can not continue generating the complex issues that we have in Latin America and the Caribbean. And so that there are no other economies, hidden economies, because the negation of entering into the formal economy could be complex economies where which could lead to things that would not be that good. Even when there is a pseudo anonymity and there are some products and services with anonymity, we need to make the effort of applying those standards to prevent their ill use, and where FATF rules can be oriented towards providers of virtual services, both centralized as those decentralized, that are just a software protocol where the code is activated without participation or governance from people, both for open or closed platforms. And the stable coin is very important given its market in the crypto industry and even the standards to get to non-fungible tokens, NFTs. So this could be the summary of what FATF is measuring, is aiming at. And at the last report, they make an assessment with the implementation, which is really limited. And we can see how in most of the jurisdictions that have been doing this implementation, well, there's a partial complaint. And here, recommendation 15 is what I believe is the most important, where you can see how risk assessment and application of risk-based approach is being done, how the sanctions are done, and so on. So given that we do not have much time, we will not go deeper into this, but I'm going to share the slides with you so that you can check also the report. And what is happening with crypto? Is it being allowed in countries or not? Well, there was a growth in allowing the use, the purchase, the sales, the custody, the transfer of crypto. 60% of countries, according to this effort from FATF, allow the use of crypto. 27% is still evaluating whether or not it's permissible, and 14% still forbid it. And I think that FATF is going to give us news in their new report. Now, a fundamental issue considering the ISO standard 2020, 222 is how we're doing with the travel rule. The news, well, could be better, but they are, well, good. There have been some advances, but some organizations don't even answer. Some others haven't even approved the legislation so that they can allow those who use crypto to fill fulfill Rule 16 about the travel rule. For those who do not know what it is, it's all of that information that a payment message needs to have, or a payment chain needs to have, so that it can move from institution to institution until it gets to the final beneficiary of that transaction. So Gafi has spoken about an implementation at a global level of this situation of the travel rule and the crypto space. And well, we will see the important risks because we will not know the information about the real beneficiary of these transactions, and with that, the compliance activities and the prevention of AML, which can be really very difficult. Allow me to ask you a quick question specifically about the future of this travel rule. Do you think that with a low level of global compliance that we have currently regarding this travel rule, do you think that it is a realistic idea to expect a generalized reaction for the coming years? Well, we need to get to that, number one. I am not well, I think it's going to be difficult, but there are clear signals of great issuers of tokens or stable coins who have been preparing, and probably if there's an adoption of these tokens, which are cryptos, which are stable, that have to do with a specific coin and real, so that if the big banks in the world adopt these tokens as a way to move money with a greater agility, with less costs and less time, I think that this will bring us closer because I think that most people will try to be on that side where there's greater visibility, movement, and transparency. So we need to wait for a little bit. And I think that Gafi for July this year should bring us a clearer idea of the advances, because there's also something that I think will help. Not going into crypto, especially some kinds of financial institutions, could be a matter of competitivity. And if there's a greater adoption, well, people will adapt to the game. And I think that that will allow for short term or midterm to really fulfill globally with this, comply globally with this situation. There can still be some who believe that crypto is not feasible, that it will not work. Well, when sector moves 3 billion, well, I'd pretty much say that it's hard for it to disappear. There's a condition, I would say, that this is going to move forward, it will be maintained, and well, people will want crypto products, and well, all of that force together is going to move us towards there. Thank you. I think that it's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, let's speak about cryptocurrency economy, which is central for our presentation. Let's see how things are, because there has been a war between the new boys in town, the early crypto adopters who are anti-banks, and they've had, let's say, inadequate language. And the traditional ones where there have been some wars and there has been a sensitization of the sector, but it has also been penetrated by crypto structures. So let's see, based on serious studies, especially from Chainalysis, how crypto crime is. And there's a greater amount of adoption, there's a greater activity of on-chain, and there's also illicit actors, as well as the variability of the issues. So yes, even when we have organizations like the drug cartels or migrant traffic or organ trafficking, well, they operate off chain, they make money off chain, but then we can see the clear connection with the crypto space to do the money laundering. So, how are we doing then? This is very interesting for those who are starting to understand the issue. What we understand as illicit activity tomorrow is going to be even more, because we can detect more illicit directions as we have a greater amount of information and intelligence. But currently, I wanted to show you today in this statistics that today, we understand more than 40 million, and there's an estimate of about $51 billion in illicit activities. So, if we see what's here, those of you who can check it, when we finished 2024 at about half year of 2024, we said that 2023 were 24 billions. But check today, it's well, the money from 2025, we could already say that 2023 were 46, almost double of the estimation. So what I wanted to say is, even if that this picture is very important because it facilitates the greatest amount of addresses we can identify, well, we can see the illicit activity. So this is something that is increasing. But for the crypto friendlies who protect their sector, and of course, I understand that very well. Well, they say, even so, the percentage of illicit activities on chain is less than 1%. It's even 0.14%. If we go to the real economy world or off chain, well, the IMF, the BMI, the International Bank, and they're speaking about a lower number. And well, these are the comments that one usually hears from the influencing people in both sectors. And this is something that I would like to show you how things change. Bitcoin until 2020 or 2021 was the king, or let's say the most used crypto asset by crime to do crypto crime. But look at how this has changed. And now, for a couple of years ago, the stable coins are the ones preferred by organized crime to carry out crypto crime activities. They do not want volatile assets. They think as financing. And look at how that pattern has changed. There are indications that crypto crime has been reduced in many areas, but frauds are still increasing, and we can see almost 10 billions, and we believe this can even get to 12 billion, where there are two big trends of fraud in blockchain which are happening. And these are high revenue investments where, well, they're very complex to obtain or difficult to get. And that's why they allow to promise this. And we're going to be talking about that. And the big butchering, or that modality that is the pig butchering, is something that is happening now where amongst both of them, we're speaking about more than 80% of the scams in blockchain. The pig butchering is, well, it's, let's say it's a romantic scam, not because of romance, but because of trust. These are actors that online try to find people for some jobs, and they have a micro movement of crypto and with a low yield. And when there's enough trust, they can create a scam on a big scale. If you want to go into the FBI webpage, joint operations with the secret services in the US, they say something very powerful for blockchain. I'm more of a blockchain than crypto, really. And look at this, how interesting. Traceability, transparency with the right tools that the authorities use can actually prevent what is going to happen, something that had not always been possible in the fiat world. And look at how the FBI has managed to notify more than 4,000 people who were about to be scammed. And many of them were scams. 76% of those victims were unaware of them being in a scam, and that possibly there was a prevention to make these victims lose more than $280 million. You can see how some people lost a lot of money in meme coin that has no use, that it's a simple digital representation of a person or of a famous person or something that has, let's say, an influence. It has no use per se. And look at how that has taken to some people even consider killing themselves for having lost it all. So, this is a message to open your eyes and be careful with scams and this scams that might be happening. And that dirty money or those crypto that can be obtained through different mechanisms and ransomware, where do they go? Look, exchanger, decentralized. I'm sorry, centralized exchange. What used to happen where the exchanger or the VAPs, which were decentralized, now there's a clear picture, especially into 2024. I think this will not change, considering what we have been reading at the Crypto Crime Report of Chainalysis 2025. But the money is going to centralized exchanges. And what I wanted to remind you is that as there has been a great amount of scams of what I was mentioning, well, ransomwares are still increasing in an important manner. Here in Bitcoin, this is still one of the preferred coins for the payment of ransomware because, well, they can offer also less ability of following the victims given the initial nature of crypto. Look at how we used to talk about very small payments, but now the trend is for this ransomware to have a greater amount of power because they attack more critical infrastructure companies that have a great amount of power, influence, and which are bigger. So you can see how the size of the payment is now being generated at a very bigger amount than what we were used to seeing. Another fundamental part. Let's speak about OFAC and how it has entered into its role of administration, sanctions in the crypto world. The first designations were in 2019. Until 2020, they were wallets or addresses, personal addresses. And in 2021, there's a beginning of a sanctioning for platforms and service platforms, and specially sanctioned decentralized pieces. So this tries to explain the evolution and look at how OFAC has been oriented to ransomware, given the big problem this represents. And the ransomware attacks are financially motivated but others are not. So here we could be discussing about, for instance, geopolitical weapons, and as what we have been able to see in Russia and Iran and North Korea, activities directed to active information, to facilitate espionage, and also to make damage to critical infrastructure. And that's why we're speaking about new wars, or those wars that are not necessarily violence through weapons, but through cyber weapons. The message regarding how we see OFAC sanctions and regarding crypto, drugs, money laundering, Ukraine invasion, ransomware, all of this cyber crimes. And here you can have there's been a C servers. I did manage to put it here on the table, which was also important. It has to do with Russia, with infrastructures as a service, and it is available for those who want to do criminal activities of cyber crime. You can buy software or malware from C service, ransomware, and then they rent this infrastructure to empower these infrastructures and make there's cyber crimes. Look, there's an issue that we discussed at our firm, and for us, it's very interesting. And it's that we have seen that when OFAC sanctions, it's basically the death of that entity, person who has been sanctioned. And look at what happened with Hydra Marketplace. And that's what happened basically. But, well, what happened with the Tornado Cash, Mixer? Well, the matter came down, but the last statistic we saw for Garantex, for instance, there was a sanction, and even so, there's still movement. I would like to verify maybe a more recent statistic that we could share and think about how the crypto space is not necessarily replicating the things that we can see on the fiat side. And that's why the concerns. Okay, mixers. What we need to understand is that it is a decentralized open source code designed to mix cryptocurrency. It obfuscates other transactions history, and it is not really possible to recognize who is sending to who. That allows us to break relationships between who is the originating and who's the beneficiary. And this impedes the effective action of justice. Of course, this is going to have a right to privacy. There are many legitimate things why we use mixtures as in authoritarian countries where they need to know that there's an NGO that is being financed, for instance, like things we're seeing, investigative journalisms. These are legitimate reasons for using the mixed services, but at least 25% of the services are used for illicit activities or with money that stems from illicit activities. What is clear is that even if we're speaking about software pieces that do not have people behind it, it's just a contract, a smart contract that makes makes it all. Well, the US have been very clear about how decentralization is not defense and that it's not only going to sanction the platform, but also the ones who create it and who allow crime. So here there's an interesting matter to keep discussing about. super important. We need to, if we will integrate the models, we need to understand how to determine the crypto profile of our customers, to understand the expected profiles, their behaviors, to allow segmenting customers according to the use of digital assets, increase alignment with KYC and AML regulations, to have a good monitoring and follow up of the relationship. And this is going to help us recognize what is usually expected behavior for the client. And this is fundamental data for the business. So basically, we need to understand the financial profile, the ability to have crypto equity, what is directing it, where it's coming from, where it's going, but also which is their equity. Here, the banks that are usually focused on monetary issues, on cash and cash flow, we need to generate a crypto equity because the one who have purchased 10 years ago an asset like Bitcoin, well, the equity now is completely different, and with the volatility of Bitcoin, even more. So it's important to have visibility. We need to understand the purpose of that crypto. Is that an activity that is personal? Is that business? Which are the account statements? Which are the tools that will allow us to view the history of those wallets and understand in that recognition which are the kinds of assets to see, for instance, if there are privacy assets, which is also a right, but we also know that these are being used for illicit activities to understand which is the profile of that person regarding the amount and frequency of transaction. And when we talk about that activity, we need to recognize if our client is doing trading, investment, or P2P to make small margins, or if they're putting their money to make staking, mining, or if they're using the money on DeFi platforms to get a specific performance, a specific yield, or NFTs. So that risk profile, according to their activity, is going to help us interpret and understand whether they're private coins, if we have these mixers or tumblers, or which are the kinds of assets, the types, the amounts, the frequency, if these are wallets that are in a centralized or decentralized VASPs, and something that is very important that is only now achieved with the right tools is to recognize the exposure types that the wallets have. Many are going to come with wallets that have been recently created without any history, but as transactions happen, we are going to have a specific exposure for those wallets. And we need to understand what the type of exposure is and what is the category it entails. Because the direction of the role and the type of exposure, if it's direct or indirect, that is going to allow us to determine with greater clarity if this is a client with a wallet that could represent a greater risk or a smaller risk. So this is very important to adequately interpret with the right knowledge and technology, because otherwise this could generate false negatives or increase the number of false positive, which is something that we have been fighting against, given the cost, the operational cost that this is also creating. So this is something very important. And before going to the conclusions, I wanted to talk a little bit to you about blockchain as intelligence and monitoring. Remember that especially open public blockchains, transactions are traceable, are public. They allow us to have a comprehensive analysis. With the right tools, you can get to fascinating things that cannot yet be done because the fiat world is very close in what is our institution and which are our limitations. But in blockchain, we can get to do many, many things to identify patterns, typologies, illicit activities, even in real time, so that we can comply with international regulations and standards. We can even facilitate wallet grouping, which is clustering, because there are many types and patterns where what they try to do is to not make us understand who the client is and if the client is having different tools and technologies that are helping us now identify the control of a person on different wallets, because it's difficult for us to recognize that within a blockchain without the right technology and the tools that can be transversal to monitor those transactions in different blockchains. Nowadays, we cannot see this as different islands. We need to integrate the model, and this has also been said by FATF. It's the same client. And if in your banks you're starting or you think about starting your offer of products and services in crypto, rest assured that the reach of risk analysis need to be integral. And crypto does not need to be seen as something different. That onboarding control allows us to understand which are the things associated to that crypto profile with the analysis of data and metadata that are controls that are designed and implemented can be effective for cash in from wallet to wallet, for cash out to buy, sells, and even custody if we are going to be offering all of those different products and services for crypto. We need to make sure that from blockchain, we can gather the data and metadata for the management with reliable information from independent sources and not only the information shared to us from our clients. Information is there. We just need to be prepared to attract it, to process it. And that is going to allow us to have a level of intelligence so that they cannot use our institution as a means for money laundering. We need to see which are the monitoring, tracking, the model tuning and validation, the transactional monitoring, vendors, providers, and knowing the market, because it's different for wallets that are in investment territories where there's regulation, supervision, different from those countries that are exchangers or VASP where there's no regulation, supervision, and so on. Offering crypto products and services is super easy, but what we need to know to do is be prepared to have a control mechanism. So going into the market without control, that's what GAFA is saying that should not be done. First, risk assessment, design of control environment, and then going to the market without risk assessment, and we're going to be talking about that, but adjust and validate, fine tune and validate the monitoring, the client risk, the list and detection, have an integral monitoring and tracking, have training and coaching to see the risk of the models. The internal and external audit is also focused with an efficient program. And as I was saying, we need to assess the risks in crypto products and services, because in that manner I'm going to follow the first thing, which is to understand the risk, and if there's a threat, which are my vulnerabilities and what I'm being exposed to. From there I can predictively design regarding the previous crime that have happened in a blockchain, what can happen regarding the controls that can be really be proportionate to exposure. We're not speaking about overcompliance, about creating greater friction or bad quality of services, of creating greater amount of costs, $300 million that are used to prevent in less than 1% of what we get from crime. But it needs to be proportional, and we need to have people who are capable to have a residual risk in something within our risk appetite. And do not forget that the 8 national priorities, there's a specific crypto crime in all of the national priorities. There's a presence of crypto assets as a means to move money in the organizations or of AML. So let's expect for new legal frameworks, better recommendations, greater adoption, greater amount of sanctions, greater prosecution, and I hope that there will be a greater amount of dialogue between governments and the private sector to raise risk and compliance awareness so that the standards can be adequate. And before going into the questions, I would share with you some conclusions. Regulations are still urgent, where the travel rule needs to guarantee that traceability and VASPs. And even with these issues that we have, the call is not high risk by default, but we need to assess case by case scenario where innovators, regulators, and policymakers must act in concert so that there is no regulatory depression. There needs to be responsible transformation, allowing opportunities, helping banking with the manner of getting out of poverty and having rules that will allow us to mitigate in a proportional manner, not more than what is needed according to the exposure. Okay, and since we can have a few minutes now for questions, we wanted to conclude here with the presentation. And I'm sorry if I was super fast, but I hope that the message was something that has reached to all of our audience. Thank you, Rodney. Yes, thank you very much. I have been answering to some of the questions because, well, of course, I have my questions as well that can help answer some of the questions that might come from some of our participants who didn't manage to write. Well, you are speaking very much, and we'll know about which is the impact of what can happen in crypto assets and digitals and the ecosystems that we have currently. And one of my questions is the impact of claiming in the ecosystem, because you're speaking about fraud, and so they were asking because they also write, why is FTX as an illicit activity? Well, because of the big scam. And with the increase of crypto crime, do you think that the industry is really doing enough to share the illicit use of these assets? Or is there still a greater effort to be done? Well, I think that there's always room to improve, and we some have gone as off service offering without really understanding the risk. But I think that the financial industry, after spending $300 million every year, they are not really going to increase the way of moving out of poverty. I think that they're well, helping with their grain of sand, because the effectiveness with which the authority in some countries in the world are acting and are not being efficient in the level of intelligence, supervision, intelligence, they're not being done in other ways. So even if one is supervised and regulated, I think that we also need to tell the countries and their governments that they need to see why, after everything that's being done, only 1% of those that organized crime is being produced is being modified. Yes, and regarding this issue of regulations, supervisors, and so on, this should be the real focus of regulators to use this innovation in cryptocurrency with the need to prevent crypto crime with all of the list you have shared with us of fraud and scams. Well, my calling is not to regulatory repression, because if there's no understanding, then there's repression. No, no, not yet, because the regulator is not ready. Well, then get ready, understand what the risk is so that you can really demand from the financial institutions what's the role they need to follow. There's a very important thing that the task force president said when he was dealing with all of the standards. Same business, same risks, same rules. So we're on the same business with different means, but with the same rules. So when I say same rules, let's not forget that FAT already said that there's undesired consequences of the standard, that we have not used correctly, and that we will not repeat the undesired consequences. So we have an experience to understand which are the issues, but without a doubt, let's go to institution without knowledge, without technology, adapting to processes. If they don't do that, it's going to be difficult to be efficient. We have a question here. Thank you, Gonzalo, for your question. What's your position regarding the enthusiasm of Bitcoin in El Salvador and what happened in Argentina last week? Could that be a copy of the experience of El Salvador? Well, I have my super personal opinion regarding El Salvador. I think that it was the cheapest marketing campaign where with 400 million they have placed a country within the map. They have a lot of money from early adopters, from technology. So I have my super personal position about what the conversion of Bitcoin to a legal tender happened in El Salvador. So that's something that's maybe changing now, and we're going to see how that ends. I think that demanding acceptation of Bitcoin as a means of payment from people can be something very complex given the volatility and the change in policies. In demanding people the accepting Bitcoin as a means of payment, and I could lose in minutes what is being paid by any product or service. So I think that it is a correct measure to move to maybe take a step backwards, but allowing crypto to work, and the ones who want Bitcoin, good. They can get Bitcoin, by those who don't, well, they don't. Well, regarding Argentina, I will be prudent right now, if you allow me. If Gonzalo is my friend, Gonzalo Villas, I prefer to be cautious. And yes, we have someone who has raised their hand. And Gerald, if you want to write your question here on the Q&A, that would be easier for us. And in the meantime, since we only have 3 minutes, what could you share with us to prevent from scams with crypto? Because we see that, as you were saying, this is a method that is, well, a solution for many people at a world level who can now have access to money, to entering into the economy, right? But it is also being used, as you were saying at the beginning, to many types of scams. As you were saying, the pig butchering, fraud, scam, ransomware. So what can we do regardless of what the financial institutions can do to protect themselves? But us as consumers, what can we do? As we're saying, too good to be true, careful. Meaning that those offerings that you cannot see anywhere else in the market, will be careful. Make your assessment, make your research, because the crypto world is transparent, is traceable. You can understand when a coin has reduced its price, who's behind it, the credibility of the people who do it, what is happening in Argentina. Well, we'll see how that develops, but do not be scammed. Do not be taken away, because I think crypto right now is extraordinary for financial inclusion, for cyber payments, for greater efficiency, for investment to try and find some yield. Well, if you want to speculate, then you also have to be willing to lose. So be very careful with those offers that could be too good to be true, because you could be scammed. So first, do your assessment, ask, and then make your decision. Informed decisions will take you to good decisions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rod. And well, with this, we have reached the top of our hour, and I would like to thank you for your presentation. It was fast, but it was very complete and important. And thank you, Celeste, for having given us the space and the time to do this with RiskRadar. I hope that, well, for this for the next time, we can also do something from RiskRadar for all of our participants to speak about OFAC, which is something, well, very current given the changes that are taking place. So thank you very much. And one last thing, the video, the presentation, all of the presentation material will be shared with you in a couple of days. We're going to have it. So thank you very much to Rod for the wonderful presentation, a lot of information, super valuable. And thank you, Ana Maria. And thank you to each and every one of you for having joined the webinar. Thank you. Great success to everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.